Kakalosh Boker Tov. We're starting today's daf is going to be daf kaf 20. We are going to start on Yutetam Ubet, the last line, right? The last lines, or the second last line, where it says Rav Nachal Taman. Rav went down to Bavel. Chamtun Mekilin, and he saw that they were Mekilin on Basar Shenitale Minayin. So remember, Basar Shenitale Minayin, the concept is that if you have meat where I lost control over the meat, it was obviously meat that wasn't covered with double seals or things like that, and therefore I have no control what happened to the meat. So he says, V'chamar alehen, he was machmir on them. This is a famous story on the plane where somebody went to do Netilat Yadayim, and then when he came back, right, he realized it was basar shenitale minayin, so he didn't want to eat it. And then his neighbor, which was the guy sitting next to him, who was a goy, asked him, why don't you want to eat your food? So he basically explained to him the halacha, and he told him, you should know that I was always interested to know what was kosher food. So I switched the meat I switched the sandwich, basically, my sandwich with your sandwich, right? And therefore he realized halacha. Huh? Yeah, listen. So it says here, Chad bar Nash Azil. There was one person that he went. Yeah, Kaf Amud Aleph on the top, 28:1 on the top. So he wanted to rinse out the meat, right, that he had in the river. He wanted to rinse out Kaf Amud Aleph, 28:1 on the top, 20, Kaf. Yeah? So it says, so what happened? So it says, so he forgot the meat there and he left. Chazar, he came back. Ba'omesida, he wanted to take the meat. Amar le Rav, says Rav, yeah, asur lecha, you're not allowed to. Dinamar, because I'm going to say, Haisha tafnara, your meat was washed into the river. And now there's another piece of meat that came in front of you. Meaning it's not the same piece of meat. Maybe it's another piece of meat. Okay, fine. Another story. There was somebody going in the shuk, and he wanted meat. Yeah, now he was carrying meat. It was a tzipor, a bird that came and grabbed it away from him. And he threw it somewhere. He wanted to come and take it. Maybe it was a basar nevela. He switched it. And then the bird was carrying another one. Meaning you saw the bird at the beginning. The bird stole your meat. You understand? But then after a few minutes, it could be that it changed meats. And now when it's throwing it down and finally later and you see it, and now you come to collect it, maybe it's another piece of meat. Another similar story. Ginai. It was a Nahar Ginai. There was a river. Shatav Zikin. That it was full of wine. Right? And they found it on Sfat Anar. They found a whole bunch of barrels of wine. So he comes and he says they should check the ones which they're throwing the wines, the keshes, which means that they should check how is the knots done. And if they do it in that fashion, so then we know that it's the same one. Meaning that if you have like a type of a sign which is 100% that this is yours, so then it would be okay. Yeah? That's why, for example, by the way, you should know this halacha even applies to many times people have cleaners, right? Or they have people in their houses. And if they're in their houses and they could start touching the meat and doing all these things with the meat, it's very, very problematic. Very problematic. Everyone knows the story, right, that happened here in Miami of a family, right, that everyone knew that their chamim, that their cholent was the best in all of Miami. Everyone knew it. Yeah, everyone was speaking about it. Something incredible. So everyone thought they had an incredible recipe. It happened that the cleaner got into a fight with them, and she quit, and she basically confessed to them, like to put it in their face and telling them that every single week she would add milk to their chamim. Every single week. It was a huge story that came out here in Miami. Well, you can't take that to court. Go take a woman to court. She's a bankrupt woman, a cleaner. What are you going to do now? The next story is Nekunya Ishtakach Bekrishta Debule. So Nekunya, he went, and there was jugs of wine which was found in the Bet Knesset of Bule. So you see, finding wine in Bet Knessiot was common. Yeah, that's why Baba Chaki has a stash over here. Yeah. Ata uvda kumer Rabbi Yirmiyah. So the story came in front of Rabbi Yirmiyah. Amar, and he said, "Yitchakemun sakreo vidton." Check their melacha, which means check them. How check do they recognize them or not? Meaning that if there's going to be a sign which you could make, so then it's going to be okay. That's why, by the way, you should know all the butchers and everything, the way that they package the meat, it's like a double seal and with a sticker. Because first of all, they would have to forge the sticker, which they don't usually have, right? Everyone has their own sticker, right? And second of all, they do it in such a way that the second you break it open, you can't put back the same cling film on something else. You understand? Like, you'll tell. So they do it in such a way that it's like a seal. So if you recognize a seal that it's going to be kosher, it's going to be okay. There was a roasted kid, right? Remember the goat, the son of the goat. Yeah, that was found in the streets of the city of Gufta. But they permitted it because of two things. Number one, because of Mitzia, right? Because they found it, right? So he says, right? That means basically they said that they're allowed to take it to themselves. And number two, Mishum Rov Malched Derachim, because the majority of the people, right, are travelers. So since the majority of the people are travelers, so let's explain. Mishum Mitzia, the Tanya Matzil Miyada Miyada Gayas, Mishunata Yam, Mishunata Nahar. What happens right now if you saved, whether it's going to be an animal or whatever it is, from a lion or from a gayas, from people which are, like armed robbers? Mishunata yam, from a big like a whirlpool or one of these rip currents, or from one of these things, or from Mishunata nahar, or from a big street or a big, kikar is like a big. The plaza, where they have the big places. So all these things, they belong to the finders, keepers, losers, weepers. Why? He says because of Ba'alim, they already give up hope. Meaning if there was armed robbers coming and stealing something, the guy has very little hope he's going to get that back. You understand? So he says, and what's the Mishum Rov Melched Derachim? Mishum Shchitat Nochri, which means that they didn't suspect because of Nochri, because the majority of the people that were coming by were Jews. Meaning, since the majority of the people that were coming by were Jews, so they said it was probably Jewish. And afterwards, they actually found out that it belonged to the house of Rebbe, and therefore they permitted it. Igul de guvna ishtaka pepunte de Levi. There was a igul of gvina, of cheese, that was found in the inn of Levi. And they permitted it because of two things. Number one, because of mitziyah, because of romel chederachim. Because of the mitziyah, because we already learned. The same thing that we just said above, right? They belong to him because the owners already lose hope. Okay? And because of because of Gvinat Nochri. That means basically they didn't have to, since the majority of people were going by were Jewish, we're not going to suspect that it's non kosher cheese. And it also was from the house of Rabbi Lazar, Rabbi Yosef. Amar Rabbi Mana Kumer Rabbi Yosef, says Rabbi Mana in front of Rabbi Yosef, says what? But we find that the rabbis come and they start mentioning, they start announcing that who lost this thing and so on and so forth. So what are you talking about? Samalei, he says, At in havata meshkach lo nasaft. He says what? If you would have found it, you would have wanted they should give it back. He says, Alvai that we should find it, but if we're already going to find it, we should find it from the piusa and from the inside. So that way, because there's a lot of people there, therefore we shouldn't have to give it back. So what are you talking about? We shouldn't have to give it back. So he comes and he says, Afilu ken ashkach velo nasiv. He says, even with so, right, still he did find it, and he didn't take it for himself, and he gave it back. That means even though he himself came, you know what, Halvai that I should find something that I don't have to give it back, he did find something and he did give it back. So there's a natural instinct that you should want to give it back. You understand that? That's the norm. Okay, fine. Says a Mishnah, Halakha Gimel, in the middle of the page of Kaf Amud Aleph. An animal that was found from Yerushalayim until Migdal Eder, and the same distance to every single direction. So if they're going to be males, they're olot, burnt offerings. If they're going to be females, they're zivchei shlamim, they're peace offerings. Rabbi Yehuda says, right? He says, if the animal was a keves or an ez, which is a sheep or a goat, a male within the year, so then that's fitting for a korban pesach. So it's going to probably be a korban pesach if it's found 30 days before the chag. Okay, but that means they're already preparing for the korban pesach. But do you know that at the beginning they used to actually take a mashkon from the finder, from the one that finds the animal, until he used to bring the wine libations. But what happened is that they didn't want to be obligated in the wine libations. So what happened? The people that found the animals would just leave it. They didn't want it. Why should I take a headache? Right? They're going to find an animal now. I have to bring the wine libation as well. It's not even my animal. I just found it. right? So therefore itkinu. So therefore they went and they made a takana that it was the betin was the one that was bringing it, right? The wine libations from the tzibur, right? And then nobody used to come and then they used to take the animal because what do they care now? They're not losing any money. Amar Rabbi Shimon says Rabbi Shimon, there were 7 things that Betin instituted to do with the korbanot that is going to come from the money of the tzibur, of the congregation. This is one of them. Okay? Now we're going to say the other takana. The takana, the second one. Imagine right now, the goy sends his korban, a sacrifice, a korban olah, burnt offering from dinat hayam. Now he sent money for wine libations. It's going to come from him. If not, so then it's going to come from them. That means if he didn't send any money for the wine libations, we bring it. We bring the wine libation for him. The same halacha would apply to a ger, a convert that dies, and he left over animals. If he left over nisachim, so then they bring it from his. But if he didn't bring it, so then we bring it for him because he was a ger that died and there's no family members, right? Remember that a convert has no family. So if right now he dies, unless he has children, right, he has no family, right? They don't inherit him, okay? Utnai, and remember that the wife doesn't inherit according to halacha. So Utnai betin, right? It says over here that Utnai betin is, right? Al kohen gadol shemet, and a kohen gadol that dies, shetei minchato krivi mishel hatzibur. His mincha offering, the mincha chavatim, which is asidita efa, would come from the congregation. Yehuda says no, it comes from the yorshim, right? The inheritors, and not from the tzibur. 5th takana, right? On salt and on wood that was used for the korbanot, so the betin instituted that the kohanim are permitted to benefit from them for doing all the different things. Even though mikadadin there's an isur of mi'ilah to use it for personal benefit, they're allowed to. Right? That means they're allowed to use it even though it's going to be for personal usage. Okay? They also made on the para duma, the betin instituted that there's no mi'ilah in the efer. Okay, that means if somebody is going to benefit from it, he doesn't have to bring a korban milah. Ve'ala kinin, the last one, psulot, that it comes from the tzibur. Yosef Omer, misapeket kinin, misapeket psulot. The ones that were giving the kinin, meaning the sellers, they had to give the psulot. Okay, fine. Says the Gemara. Rav Oshia Rabba comes and he says, right, an animal that was found, for sure it's not going to be brought by itself, because we don't know if it's an olah or shlamim, a burnt offering or a peace offering. So levabid mehen shanu. So says the Gemara, obviously we're talking about that he obligated himself for the money. So Mishnah is that if you found it, so they made a takana, they wanted to make a takana for the finder that he's able to accept upon himself the money in order to be mechalel kedushav and an animal in it, so that way they could bring another animal. So Amar Rabbi Yochanan says Rabbi Yochanan to him, to Rav Oshaya, omrim lo le'adam tzeu mor b'kochim. Well, you're going to go and tell a person, go out and do milah b'kochim. Milah is having benefit from kochim. What's going on? Ela, but rather hilchu b'ayin achar rov. We're going to go after the majority. Im rov zecharim olot. If the majority of the animals were found were males, so then they're olot. If the majority animals were females, so then there's zivchei shlamim. Okay. Next, ena shlamim ba'im min hazechim lekvot. He says, 1 second. But I thought that the shlamim do not could come from both. So it's like a sefek shakul. I don't know which one it comes. Meaning a shlamim could be either a male or a female. So Keitzadul says, so what's he going to do then? Motzian lechulin. You have to take all of them out to chulin. Vechozer ve'oseh otan, right? Olot. And then you come and you make them into olot. Kaf amud bet, 20b. You make them into olot. Amar Rabbi Zera, a third explanation on the Mishnah. Kema de'at amar taman, just like you said over there, t'nai betinu al motorot, there's a t'nai betin, a condition of betin on the leftovers. Sheikavu olot, that it goes to the olot. Kenat omer more ufhacha, you're also going to say over here also the same thing. T'nai betinu al avodot, sheikavu olot. Right? And also the same thing, that it's going to be brought as olot. So says the Gemara, Amar Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yaakov Baracha, says Rabbi Yosef to Rabbi Yaakov Baracha, enze mezid? You're doing a b'mezid here. Right? That means you're changing b'mezid, like purposely, a peace offering, a shlamim, to an olah. You're not allowed to do that. Amalei, he says, no, the second it became a condition of betin, it's not b'mezid anymore. You're doing it with, you're supposed to be doing that way. It's okay. It's not b'mezid anymore. Okay? Amar Rabbi Yasa, says Rabbi Yasa, Adan Ataman, when I was still there in Bavel, before I went up to Ritzel, I used to hear of Yehuda asking Shemuel, what do you do if a person separates his machatzita shekel and then he drops dead? So said Shemuel, he should go to a nedava. So motar nesidita ifa shelo. So now 1 second, the leftover, the Masechet, it should come from the money of the Kohen Gadol. Rabbi Yochanan says, you're going to throw it over the Yam Melach. Rabbi Elazar says, Yiplun Nedava, it's going to go to the Nedava. Asita Efa shel Kohen Gadol. The Asita Efa of the Kohen Gadol. Rabbi Yochanan says, Chotzeota, you're going to divide it. And then you're going to sanctify it in a utensil of the Kli Sharet. Shimon Lakish says, Mekatsha, you're going to sanctify it, and then afterwards you're going to divide it. So Matnita Pligel Rabbi Yochanan, our Mishnah is arguing Rabbi Yochanan, right? Umakriv mechza umechza avad. So he says what's going to happen is that you're going to divide half, and half of it is going to go to the waste. So now if it's going to go according to Rabbi Yochanan, only half of the Yissaron was holy, right, each time. So therefore, when the Kohen Gadol split it up into two, it still wasn't sanctified, right? And then afterwards, when they're going to come and they're going to sanctify it, so why is the second half going to waste? So answers the Gemara, Patalei la, he went and he answered him, Sheken afilu yelchu Yam HaMelech. He said, no, even if it was the money would go to Yam HaMelech, right? Like we said above. That means even though it only has Kiddushat Damim, which is Kiddushat on the money, they would still throw it out in the garbage. They would throw it out in the sea. Matznita pliga Rabbi Shimon Lakish. So our Mishnah is arguing on Rabbi Shimon Lakish because it says, comes out 2 halves are going to be brought and 2 halves are going to be thrown out. The Tani Lam we learned the first half and the second half they're going to have to waste, become like rotten, and then you're going to take it out to burn it. Now, if it's like Rabbi Shimon Lakish, right, that is only on the half is Kiddushat Ruf, why do you have to wait for to bar tzurato in order to burn it? You should burn it right away. So he says, Patala Rabbi Shmuel, Daman Saron Mekadesh. He says, no, the actual saron in itself, which is the actual utensil which is used to measure it, that in itself is Mekadesh the Yisrael. That in itself makes it holy. Not only just the Kli Sharet. So when the Kohen used to come close to do the services, he used to bring his own asirita efashelo, ve'ovda biyado, and he himself used to bring it. It doesn't matter whether it's Kohen Gadol or Kohen Idiot. Shavdu ad shelo iviu asirita efashelo mevda keshitah. So now, if they did the service without doing the asirita efa, it's still going to be kosher. Rabbi Mana ba'ya memad. Rabbi Mana wanted to say, Bo bayom shenitkarev tchila lavoda, bo bayom nitpanan leKohen Gadol mevi shtayim. Do you know that what happens if a Kohen Gadol is inaugurated on the day? The day that he's inaugurated, he's going to bring 2 minchat chavitin. 1 for the inauguration, and 1 because of the obligation, right, of every single day. So he's going to have to bring 2. He has to bring 2, not 2 for 1. He has to bring 2. Okay, 1 for the inauguration and 1 for every single day that he was obligated to bring. So tufine, what does that mean? Tufine minchat pitim. B'shat avat tufine ve'em b'shachrit tufine. The minchat pitim were only brought. Right? It says over here, you don't do it in the nighttime. You don't bake it in the nighttime, right? Before Alot HaShachar. It has to be during the day. So the second, I thought that they actually told, right? We learn in Tamid that you're actually going to tell them to do the chavitin even before Alot HaShachar. Right? Before dawn, you tell them to start making the chavitin. So Amar B'chia Baracha says, B'chia Baracha, la'asot chamin l'revucha. He says, no, really, be'emet, what are we talking about? You're preparing the hot water in order to knead it. But the actual preparing of the chavitim was only done later on during the day. Tufine, what does that mean? When was this baked? Rabbi Yaseh Rabbi Chanina used to fry it, and then he used to bake it. No, he says he used to bake it and then fry it. So according to everybody, it's baked and fried. The question is, what's the first and what's the second process? Tufine, te'afena na. You have to bake it when it's still, right? That's what it says. Because when you're baking it, it's already a little bit cooked. Rabbi says, no, tefena na'a, right? Which means that when you're doing it, it has to be done properly, which means that if you're first going to fry it and then you're going to do it, it already becomes like blackened because of the frying. So it's not good. Rabbi Dosa Omer, tefena riba. You have to do it a few times. You have to bake it. So atin le palgata behi kinun palgata. So this machloka between these rabbis is like the other rabbis. The one that says you have to do it nicely, so you have to first bake and then fry it. According to Mandan Tafini, you have to do it right, that it has to be already a little bit cooked. So that's like Tanakama, right? That he says you have to first roast it, like fry it, and then afterwards you're going to bake it. So says the Gemara, lo sof tavar shemet, right? This is only you're talking about if the Kohen Gadol actually died, right? But not only if he didn't not only die, but even if he became pasul to the kiuna, it's the same thing. Meaning, what happens if he became, right? Even if right now he becomes tameh, you would say the same thing. That means, imagine right now you found out that Kohen Gadol became tameh. It's the exact same halacha, or it has to be that he actually died. So says the Gemara, afilu nitcha mimum. even if he was pushed off because of a blemish. Let's say he fell and he broke his hand. He becomes a blemished. Even in that case, he will be the same halacha. Okay? Tani Rabbi Yehuda ben Pazi devar delaya va'afilu nidcha mimum. So they thought the same thing, that even if it was going to be because of a mum. Okay, minan lekohen gadol shemeh velo minu acher tachtav sheteh minchato kreva b'shel yoshim. How do we know that if the kohen gadol dies and they still didn't get another one, so that his korban mincha is going to be brought from the inheritors? Tamun lomar mi banav ya'asota, from his children you're going to do it. Yachol Yeviana would think that you're going to bring it half, just like the father. Tamun lomar ota kula, the entire thing in one shot. Instead, because usually the father used to bring half in the morning, half in the nighttime. Here they would bring all at once. These words are Yehuda. Shimon Omer, Shimon says, "Enabela mishat tzibur." It used to come from the tzibur. Shneimar, chok olam im misha b'yo krutalo, kalil tokta, kalil aktara. So it will come from the entire tzibur, not from him. Kohen gadol shemet, Rabbi Ba bar Mamal, by Michalfa shetid Rabbi Shimon. He wanted to change the shitav Rabbi Shimon. Taman Amar over there, he said that it comes from the inheritors, and here he's saying it comes from the community. So which one is it? So Amar Rabbi Chia says Rabbi Chia, Kaf Aleph Amud Aleph on the top, Barba velo yayu tu makshe. What? It's not a good question. So the Gemara is going to actually answer up the stira, and the Gemara is going to say, "Ater Rabbi Yaakov Baracha, Rabbi Avahu, Mishum, Rabbi Avu, Mishum, Rabbi Yochanan, Tevar Torah Sheteh Be'amin Tzibur." Really, Be'amin should come from the Tzibur. Hayiti Omer Yigbula. So I would say, Minadin, they shouldn't take the money from the Trumat Lishka, but they should take it from every single individual, from the Yerushim, right? But then afterwards, they went and Bedin instituted that they wouldn't do it from every individual. They just took it from the Trumat Lishka, and that's it. We continue Bezrat Hashem on Sunday.